the board tasked with overseeing the policy and budget work of the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Portland Water Bureau. My name is Karen Williams. I am here with my co-chair, Robin Castro, and we are going to be co-facilitating this meeting today. I'm going to kick us off. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely or by phone, and the city has made it available to the public to listen in to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts on anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, and particularly that conduct that's targeted toward people who have suffered systemic inequities. This means that we step up as a community when there's wrongful conduct and foster a space of learning and growth. We speak up and speak out, and each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the board. We focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, but not the person.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the co-hosts, PUB staff, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and have not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise their hand and you will be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It's not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. As mentioned, the public comment will be taken early in the meeting during the public comment period. You can sign up through chat or raise your hand. It also is available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, the meeting is being recorded.
Thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be working on a couple of things today, one big one and a smaller one. After our usual disclosure of communications and public comments and review of minutes, we'll spend up to 10 minutes providing feedback to Bob and Lorraine regarding our thoughts about what we're looking for in a new BES director. And then after a hard stop at 10 minutes or less, then we're going to provide feedback to staff who will be recording it on the initial budget letter that Tom and Alexis have worked on. Thank you for that effort. And we'll close after some announcements at 12:30. So let's go ahead and see if there is anyone that has any communications to disclose before we get started. Give you a second to raise hands. Teresa?
Hi, yeah. I continue to talk to ABEF staff about the neighborhoods to river grants. So I had some communications in that context. Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa. Bob?
I've had several conversations about the Bureau realignment process over the last couple of weeks. And the effort to start to consolidate and move pieces of bureaus around to prepare for the transition to the new form of government in 2 years.
Thank you, Bob. And no other disclosures I see. So let's take see if there is any public comment Members of the public, you can chat Eliza and Amy and let them know if you would like to make a comment, and you can also push *9 if you're on the phone to raise your hand.
He didn't receive any requests. And Bob, I saw just rose his hand again. So that may be.
Yeah, one other disclosure, sorry, I meant to say this too.
That's okay.
As I'm leaving Audubon on February 1st, so I'll have a different affiliation going forward. Still relevant, it overlaps with this. So I'll talk about that on February 2nd, but I want to make sure folks were aware that my affiliation with Audubon is ending in about 12 days, 15 days, something like that.
Thanks for saying that, Tom, and congratulations on a very esteemed career of public service and service to the environment. So thank you for that. All right, so we do not appear to have any public comment. So let's go ahead and take a quick look, if you haven't already, at the January 3rd minutes, and let us know if there are any corrections or additions or inadvertent omissions that have been made in those minutes that you would like to see addressed. Seeing no hands and hearing no one piping up, the January 3rd minutes stand as a record of the January 3rd meeting. Thank you, Eliza, for compiling those. All right, BES director interviews. Glancing at the clock for my own facilitation guidance. So a few folks had emailed in their thoughts already to staff on BES director qualifications and experience that they're looking for, and that has been is being shown on the screen now. What's been forwarded to Lorraine and Bob. So let's take a couple minutes and see if folks would like to add anything to that list. And I can't raise my hand. I would like to put myself in the queue, but I want to hear from other folks first. Tom, please go ahead.
Well, as I'm looking at these notes, I think I'm the one that put the futuristic thinking in there. And what I'd like to say about that is with the new organization of the city coming up in 2 years, and looking at Commissioner Mapp's memo to the transportation staff, that there's talk about creating, or something about potentially creating, a public works organization that would be the umbrella for water, BES, and transportation. So however that goes, but what I'm getting at is, as well as looking at how do they see this city evolving, because they're coming into a job at a time when things are going to be some things are going to be a moving target, I guess. But what struck me is the work that, for instance, Water Bureau and BES are doing right now. And for instance, the Tryon Creek property in Lake Oswego, to me, that property, we're without getting into it, part of the deal is that the property is sold to Lake Oswego. And I think a futuristic leader would be someone, or a facilitator would be someone who could look at different issues and say, well, perhaps that's not a good time to sell that property, because maybe the city might need the property to help address issues associated with Water Bureau, because Water Bureau's got a problem with the Willamette Crossing now. So what are they going to do with that? Is there a potential that we might need property on the west side versus the east side as it relates to water and sewer? All kinds of things like that. I'm not trying to say there's any one thing, but somebody that can look at on the horizon and start looking at, well, what are we facing and how are we going to address those issues, and how might we best manage our assets and and decisions. So anyway, that's what I wanted to just kind of share that part, because I think we're at a juncture here that's really important for someone with those capabilities. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for elaborating on that, Tom. Why don't you go ahead, Bob, and then Lorraine. Get yourself unmuted. There you go, Bob.
Sorry.
Bob, you're up. Yep.
Yeah, I want to make sure people have time to give us feedback. I want to put my stuff on the table too, that I was going to bring to this, so people can see that and comment on it. And that is, this is in Bureau of Environmental Services. The job announcement barely mentioned the environment a single time. I think it was mentioned once, nothing about green infrastructure. So I'm interested in questions that get at what level of priority do they put on the environmental side of it, regulatory compliance to the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Endangered Species Act, transitioning from gray to green infrastructure, climate resiliency, all of which are spearheaded by the Bureau of Environmental Services. I thought the job announcement was startling for the lack of mention of that, given the last 30 years of history. And so I'm very interested in seeing what their experience is and what they would do to advance that side of the equation. It's not just a sewer agency. Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead, Lorraine?
So what I raised my hand for was not the current comment, but the previous comment. But I also have a question about Bob's comment, but I'll go with my previous comment. So when we are looking at issues on how long-term, if a candidate is going to be able to provide long-term impacts of decisions, if that's what I captured, but and I'm sorry, who said that? What it is in the interview process, or what questions or what responses, I'm curious, that I need to look for to ascertain that. And that could apply to all of these questions here, right? So what are you all looking for that I need to pay attention to see that someone is a futuristic thinker who is able to look at long-term impact on all decisions, right? So take into effect of that. I'm just looking for some guidance on that. And then with regard to Bob's statement, I'm not sure if I'm following what Bob said, and that's probably something on me, but I probably need to understand a little bit more what it is Bob is proposing.
Well, Tom, why don't you go ahead? Can you provide Lorraine, maybe an example question or example experience that you'd be looking for? And then as soon as he's done, Bob, why don't you go ahead and elaborate on your point that you raised?
Okay, yes, regarding, that's a really good question, Lorraine, and it's hard to answer, but the best I can do, I think, at this moment, because I hadn't put myself in your shoes. So if I was looking at the candidates, I'm thinking of some people that I know in the past have done some really good things. And I think that what I'd be looking for in their application, as well as in an interview, is some kind of experience with issues like I was just talking about. Did they work for an agency or someplace where things were coming at them and the status quo was just not going to make it anymore? And either through their own ideas or their ability to facilitate getting people around them that help them make decisions to move forward on some kind of project that was not, as I said, the status quo. In other words, they had to kind of break new ground and to do something to achieve a goal that would have been not so well achieved if they had just stuck within the standard box of thinking. So so I guess it would be looking at their application and seeing if they have some kind of project. And it doesn't have to be like that they were managing a full bureau or something like that. Do they have something there that shows they had the ability to bring people together and come up with some solutions that were, as we talk about, collaborative, you know, our goals that we have on as PUB, that we want to see interbureau collaboration, we want to see innovation, things like that. And I think we're going to need that in the future. So I'm thinking, do they show that they've been innovative, collaborative in addressing things? And I would relate that as my understanding of some of what Bob said is, have they been able to bring that to issues and technical solutions that include both gray and green? And I'm just thinking of somebody I know back east that has done this.
Hey, Tom,
he's not
can I,
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
can I interject? And I'm just seeing
Yes, please.
a lot of hands raised here. So I just want to make
Yeah.
sure other folks have a chance to get
Yeah.
on the table their thoughts.
Definitely, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bob, can I ask you to hold just for a second in your response to Lorraine's inquiry? We might be able to come back to that at the end of the meeting, but I want to make sure Alexis and Heather and Chris get their and Sarah get their 2 cents in on BES director.
Sure.
So yeah, if you can hold for a second, Bob, and Alexis, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And thanks, Lorraine and Bob, for doing this. I'm excited that we're participating in this process. Mine was how they approach decision-making when there's conflicting information. And what I would like to hear, well, one, I think that you should ask for an example of when they've had to make decisions when there's conflicting information or really hard trade-offs or something like that. And then the sorts of things that I'd be interested in hearing is trust in their staff, and rather than like them having all of the answers, but them demonstrating that they trust the input and advice of the staff and the experts on the ground, and also a real commitment to equity and to community needs, and especially in thinking about how about environmental justice issues, and thinking where the impacts of their decisions on vulnerable, marginalized communities that kind of live up to our values. So those are the sorts of things that I'd be interested in seeing come out of the interview, and a director who upholds those values in their own decision-making processes.
Thanks, Alexis. Go for it, Heather.
Yeah, this kind of goes along with futuristic thinking and green infrastructure, but I just wanted to mention that I would hope a potential director would have familiarity and commitment to Portland's climate action plan that went into effect in 2015.
Thank you, Heather. Chris Richard.
Yes, I'm hoping that we can ask some questions about how they worked for a company where we have a fairly large infrastructure that has delayed maintenance for years and years, and how they plan on trying to balance that with the push to reduce rates when inflation has been so high, and there's still the push to somehow reduce the cost.
Thanks, Chris. Sarah.
Hey, everyone. So, this is I'm coming from wearing my staff hat right now. When I see, reducing rate increases on here, and that's something that I feel is oversimplistic. It's one tool that bureaus have to balance how we're paying for things. So I would suggest, something more complex like affordability. How would they approach affordability? Because rate increases are one tool. We have trade-offs. We have, I think Gabe went through some of the tools that we have of like not filling vacancies. And this touches on what Chris was just saying, like if we don't increase rates, then we're not supporting our staff and paying them adequately. We're not going to be able to do that maintenance that we really need to do on our infrastructure or, you know, our staff buildings. And if we defer it for 10 years, it's only going to be that much more expensive. So I just want to remind the board that I know rate increase, like reducing rate increases is a thing that we think about a lot. And it's not as simple. It's not the only thing that we have available to us. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. Bob and Lorraine, is it okay if we commit to carving out that 5 minutes at the end of our meeting, where we typically have announcements? Can we come back to Bob and Lorraine, the interaction on sort of further explanation about what Bob meant in Bob's comment? Can we come back to that so we can move on to our budget letter at this point? Are we okay with that?
That's fine by me. I just want to flag though for everybody, I've been on director hiring processes several times for the city, and in recent years, there's been minimal opportunity to get these kinds of things into the process. We basically have been sitting there listening to pre-programmed questions and then evaluating. We have very, very little opportunity for this. So, and the questions were done before we got in the room. We were handed the questions. They were asked by a facilitator and we listened. So we need to keep that in mind. We may not get a lot of this stuff in.
Yeah, I thank you. Thanks for saying that, Bob. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's hold that thought for about 40 minutes or so, and let's see. I'm going to hand the reins over to Robin to facilitate your all's input on the budget letter for the next 40 minutes or so.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, so in the last week or so, we were sent a budget letter that was drafted by Alexis and Tom. So I just want to thank both of them for putting in the work to give us this rough draft version. And in a moment, the staff will be pulling up the document actually on the screen. And so we're going to kind of work through it. You can read it off the screen. I hope a couple of you read ahead and have a couple ideas. I know I do. But yeah, let's get the budget draft letter on the screen. And if you want, we can just kind of jump into it. If anyone has initial thoughts, we can kind of work paragraph by paragraph, jump around. Kind of depends on the group. I see no one speaking up yet. So I will jump back in, and that is, I was able to look at last year's budget letter and compare it to this year's budget letter, and it does seem to successfully kind of keep the same groupings, which I thought was really helpful. And with the first paragraph and the second paragraph, which are both just sentences, part of me was actually wondering if the first paragraph and the second paragraph should be a singular paragraph, and if we should have a sentence in the middle that just specifically says what we actually do as a community advisory board. And my thought on that was like, yes, we are a community advisory board, but what are we actually tasked with? Just always reminding them that it's our job to do policy, operation, and budgetary recommendations. And those are just my first thoughts on the page one.
I'll interject here just for a second with a process suggestion for folks that if you're generally in support of a suggestion that's made, it would be helpful if you indicated that, you know, whether that's a thumbs up or just chiming in and saying, yeah, that sounds good. And if you're not okay with it and you need more discussion on it, please make that known as well, so that we don't spend a lot of time talking about something that, you know, people are more or less okay with. So I will put, I don't know that I can I do a thumbs up? I'm not sure I can I? Yes, I can. Okay, good. Just demonstrating.
Does anyone else see it necessary to add the sentence in between, or is it preferred just the two that we currently have? Tom, go ahead.
I just want to make a general statement about the entire letter. I think it's much too long. I think there's much too much verbiage. I could see actually getting rid of the second sentence, that you're trying to create a new sentence to tie in to make one paragraph. I mean, I can see that looks logical and everything, but I think that just as a general statement, and I won't say any more, I just, cutting to me is better than adding, and that's my opinion.
I feel you on that one. And obviously we were working off of what we've done previously, but also kind of making our own pathway. And so I looked at last year's, and it was about 5 pages, but it had some tables in it. And so it felt like I wasn't exactly sure how long this letter should be. It kind of feels like it should be as long as we need it to be, but being very active in what we're requesting. But yeah, because I was just the first one to mention anything, I specifically thought that the first 2 paragraphs could be merged, and that one sentence in between just elaborate specifically that we work on policy, operational, and budgetary work. And it felt like it explained who we are, what we do, and exactly what the rest of this letter is bringing forward.
Any other thoughts from folks on adding a sentence? Any other thoughts in response to Tom's comment that the whole darn thing is just too long? Anyone feel strongly about either of those?
Don't be afraid.
Okay, well, I have the mic, Robin, since well, maybe I can raise my hand now. So let me just see. Can I raise my hand?
Karen Williams, go ahead.
I want to be official about this. I was, sorry, Tom, I'm suggesting adding a sentence, but you know, I think it's an important sentence. And that is in the, let me just read what I'm suggesting that we add. And I think it goes in the sort of infrastructure section. Eliza has, did you want to chime in now, Eliza, or?
Oh my goodness, Karen, no,
Okay.
I was just testing. Co-hosts can raise their hand,
Oh,
everybody.
yeah. Great to learn these things on the fly. Somewhere in this infrastructure maintenance and asset management paragraph, I would like us to consider adding a sentence that says something like this. The board also supports long-term investments that bolster the city's climate resilience, watershed protection, and seismic preparedness. And Amy, you're typing like a master. I'm happy to put that in the chat as well, but it looks like you've captured it.
No, I missed the very end because as you were talking.
Climate resilience, watershed protection, could be watershed restoration, maybe is a better word, sorry, and seismic preparedness. It seemed to me like that didn't really come out in other portions of the letter, and it kind of fit under infrastructure and asset management with the recognition that natural infrastructure is infrastructure. So.
I think that's an important add. Bob, I see you have your hand raised. Are you responding to this one, or you wanted to add something else?
Both. You beat me to the punch there, so I appreciate the addition. I was actually going to suggest a paragraph on watershed protection, environmental health, environmental regulatory compliance. I think the sentence is great. The reason I recommend a paragraph, though, is that there has been disinvestment in these programs in recent years. And we're hearing very clearly, not just from within BES, but even from the commissioner's office, that the environmental part of the BES is being downgraded at this point. And I think it's really important that we add a little more substance to this. Again, I really appreciate the addition into itself, but I think we should be asking for, recent trends in investment in watershed health, so we can actually see what's been happening, and expected future investments, and where it fits in the hierarchy. And I'm happy to take a crack at that paragraph. I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. It's been a little hectic trying to leave Audubon. But I'm happy to take a crack at a little bit broader paragraph that gets into that. I find that if we don't ask for the details, then these things become kind of high-level recommendations where everybody shakes their head and goes, yeah, that's great. Certainly we'll do that. If you get the details, it forces us into a situation where they have to say, well, here's the changes over time. And you can actually say, well, it's going the right or wrong direction. So the other thing that is just really coming onto the radar screen, but we're hearing a lot about it, is this reorganization process that's going to be parallel to the budget process, and the potential for BES programs to be transferred to other bureaus, particularly parks. And there's a lot of discussion about that. And that has huge budgetary implications, because if those programs goes, the money goes. It also has huge legal implications, i.e. the Anderson lawsuit from several years ago over misusing of funds and things like that. And I think it's really important that we flag that as something that we want to hear more about, that the pub should be involved in. If they're going to be doing major reallocation of funds and programs, that the pub needs to be on the front end of that as the community advisory group, not on the tail end. And I think we're already behind the 8 ball on that. So I'd love to see a paragraph there that just flags it and puts them on notice.
Thank you, Bob. And I appreciate both the specific requests for information, because that was one of the things I noticed about the letter. I was like, we're nicely asking for compliance, but not necessarily specifically asking for unique individual data points that can actually help us seek out our goals. And I also think it's actually really important that we do mention this shift. And so thank you for bringing that up. Before I jump to Alexis, just because we are in this paragraph, I did want to mention that I was interested in that first paragraph of the infrastructure maintenance and asset management. And it is the first paragraph, second sentence that says the pub is aware that some staff working in facilities that require significant repairs. To me, it kind of feels like we're pointing out that there needs to be repairs enough, like it's important enough that we're pointing it out in our letter, but the rest of that sentence doesn't necessarily feel like we're actually demanding the repair. I don't essentially it's like, we know that this is existing, and yes, we understand there's a handful of other things. Let's see, what did I write down? Infrastructure, sentence number 2. No, I stopped writing apparently. So my thought here was just that if we're going to say that there are staff working in facilities that are basically subpar to our expectations, we need to be a little bit more forceful in our words. And yes, it looks like I had actually brought up my own document for this. So give me just a second as I navigate my 2 screens. I essentially, in this area, I wanted to be a little bit more forceful, and that was basically being like, the pub is aware that some staff are working in facilities that require significant repairs. And while we understand that capital improvement plans must be balanced with competing priorities, Pub recognizes that these priorities should never outweigh the material realities of subpar work conditions for the employees. And in that way, it feels like we're addressing the issue on hand with enough weight, and also addressing that there are competing priorities, but that we can't constantly be like, oh, the reason why the ceiling is leaking at the Bureau of at the BES is because we were so overinvested in capital investments, or just there's never enough money. And if we're going to specifically call out the fact that we have some workers working in subpar standards, then we need to be a little bit more forceful in like, hey, this is happening, and it's not just one of those things that we're going to accept. There's always going to be competing priorities, and the workers always need to be taken care of in order to work the system. I appreciate the thumbs up from Alexis, and so I'll hand it off to them for their input.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I really like that, and agree that we should be a little bit more forceful. And as someone who like helped draft this, I want to acknowledge that kind of balance between being general in this high level sort of letter, the purpose of the letter, while also being specific. And I think that there are a number of instances where we tried to walk that line very carefully, and I really appreciate some of the specific suggestions to get a little bit more detailed and specific about what it is that we are asking for. One thing I wanted to just kind of plus one and react to, well, two things, both the addition from Karen and Baba about about environmental protections and climate resilience. I really like the idea of adding a paragraph there. And then also on the reorg process, and kind of some general comment on how we as the pub want to be involved more in some of these decisions and be consulted and be able to play our advisory role in a more effective way. And I know this is an ongoing conversation here. There are a couple of places in here where we do call that out at the end of the financial assistance programs and multifamily assistance section. Sorry, Amy, that's on page. What page is this too? We say like the pub requests continued engagement with the bureaus and the council on the evolution here. And I think that there's probably a couple of other key places where we can say that, including maybe even up at the top where, in those kind of introductory paragraphs where we say like, I like the idea of saying what our role is, and then say, and we expect to be consulted as we go, as the reorg happens, as programs and budgets are moved around like this. We're here as your community advisory board, and we'd like to be playing that role more active, in a more proactive way than be in the reactive state that we currently are in. And then a question, I'm so sorry, Amy, I'm just throwing out a bajillion things here. And then a question I think for the group at the end is, we have this whole section on our priority area alignment with the mayor's budget guidance. And I'm just curious if people think that this is helpful and adds to the letter, because I hear Tom on being shorter and more concise so that people will actually read our letter and kind of take it in. But I'm curious what people think about this section, or if we could be briefer, how important it is, if there's a more like graphic or a table way to display this that I think might kind of help our efficiencies here. Sorry, Robin, that was a lot.
Oh, no, I heard all of it. Thank you for the comments. And I see Eliza has their hand up. Maybe they have a response.
I hear everybody's additions are good, and I also was hearing the power of brevity given your audience. And so one balancing act you can do is to choose your formatting in your headers to be not just topical, but actually a short documentation of the point that you're making in that, so that your reader who's doing a skim reading can actually literally just see, this is their point, this is their point. And then they're like, oh, I'm really interested in that point. So they dive deeper into that paragraph. So that could be a potential balancing for the board of how to capture all your great thoughts, but guide your reader to your main points.
Thank you for that. I like that idea. Tom, were you responding or did you have another thing that you wanted to address?
Both. I just wanted to say that I agree with what Eliza just said. And I think you can find that on the part of under infrastructure, where some of those items that I put in regarding AMI and the Tryon Creek project are bulleted. And there's just a very brief, as a matter of fact, some of them don't have any statement to them, which I think we ought to have. And I actually had a little bit of a statement when I put them in originally. But the other thing is regarding, and especially getting to brevity, and this relates to at least the way I'm seeing how we function as a board, is that I think we need to maintain our independence, I guess I'll call it. And that what I'm getting at is that the mayor has given guidance, and I think we should acknowledge that we have looked at the guidance and appreciate the guidance. But I don't think we need to restate how we look at the world relative to the mayor's guidance. I think our job is to give recommendations to city council on behalf of the citizens of Portland. So the mayor, so I think we could just make one quick paragraph to state, thank you very much, we've read it, we'll incorporate your guidance, and we're on our way, without all of the wording and the way we're talking about it almost makes it sound to me like we sort of work for the mayor in a sense. And if I get that perception, perhaps others do, and we aren't. We're independent. If the mayor tells us something and we don't think that's the way to go, we would give advice back to the city council that anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for that. And that's also kind of how I was feeling. It felt like this part of the budget letter was just restating things that we already agreed with, and that it felt like because we are heavily aligned with the general concepts of the mayor's proposal, that this could also be something that is just completed in that first paragraph under the header, and still successfully mentions their frame and how we agree with the framing. With that, Sarah, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hey again, everyone. So I think I'm wearing more of my board member hat with this comment. So I want to just put my thoughts out there about the length. This is one of the very few opportunities that we get to get information in front of council. And, I hear you on trying to keep it brief, but there's so much nuance to all of this. And I do want, and relative to other budget documents, 5 pages is like nothing. So I do want to, encourage the board to include the relevant details to, let council know that show council that we are thinking about things in these complex ways. We understand the nuance, and this is how we're approaching our work and how we're thinking about things. So I wouldn't worry too much about if it's 5 pages or 6 pages or 3 pages. I'd more worry about are the messages that we want council to know included? But I appreciate, Tom, you bringing that up for sure. I also want to talk about RAMP. I sent a edit to Amy and a comment that she had already plugged into it. And this is more of a conversation to have with the full board. I've been on the board for about 1.5 years now, and I hear from board members, all the very important hard questions about various programs or approaches that bureaus take, and having those, hard questions and the challenges, challenging bureaus on what they're doing is part of this board's very important work. I think also showing support for the bureaus of where we think they're doing great work is also just as valuable. When I read through this RAMP section, I actually missed out on us saying like, oh, we support it. Because it went right into like, and these are the things that we are challenging, the Bureau about. And I remember from when Sarah and Anthony came and did their presentation about RAMP, there was like a lot of great support from the board, even though we did have these, big questions for them as well. So I was wondering if the board still feels like we are overall supportive of the program, even though we know there are still gaps in, providing financial assistance to renters. And, we still have maybe some like outstanding questions for them. But if we are supportive of this program moving forward, I'm wondering if the board would want to have a little bit stronger language around that. So I made one direct edit, and then I have some in the comment that Amy put there. I have a suggested like text to that we can edit and plug in if needed.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah, for that. I think Amy actually wanted to jump in and say a couple things as well. Go ahead, Amy.
Not specific to the RAMP. So if people, I don't want to interrupt that conversation if people wanted to respond to that first, because it had more to do with the prior conversation that I can go back to. So first I'll let folks comment on Sarah's comment if there was support for this additional edit and or the ones on the screen, because there were two edits that were on this document, these that were provided by Sarah, and then in the infrastructure section, adding of a step to the list of priorities within infrastructure that that PUB is particularly interested in. So those were the edits that haven't been mentioned yet, but that were received directly. And so I just put those edits into this screen, but want to get a sense of whether there's general support or not for those.
Okay. Well, in regards to what Sarah said about how emphatically we are supporting or not supporting the RAMP program, personally, I'm not super excited about it, and that's just my own singular opinion as a PUB member. It does feel like it's a step forward, but it's also, it just feels like it's maybe 1 or 2 steps forward. And I don't know, do we overwhelmingly super support this, or do we just recognize it's better than the last one, but we still think that the best is actually on the horizon? Does any of the PUB members have any viewpoints on how much they're supporting the RAMP program, or if they think that we should be like, in our words, just more actively in support of it? I see Tom's hand raised.
My impression from reading what has been written is that we do support it, but then we have all these other things that we're saying about it. And again, I think if we were more concise, and I do like what Sarah said about this, and I think we should try whenever possible to start off by saying the PUB supports such and such. So to me, I thought we do all support it, but we didn't actually have a vote on it. But that was the impression I got from our discussion in their presentation. But how much more do we need to say? And what we did say that we thought, I think we all agreed, we wanted them to try and find a way to get at those renters who are not in a nonprofit organizational housing, because those are the ones that we can't get to right now with the program. So to me, we support the program. It's better than it was. And we still see that there's a gap. We don't know how big that gap is, but there's a gap for those non-renters. So that's basically it. So I don't know why we need that. That's why I'm saying to try and minimize what we're saying, try to punch this out where we say, say things like we do support it, we don't support it, et cetera. And anyway, so that's my impression about this particular issue.
Okay. And I do see value. I do see the value in what Sarah was saying about how, I mean, personally, I can come into this space as kind of a critic and also recognize that that's not the only job we have. But there's also a possibility that this is an item that we don't just overwhelmingly support. That's totally an option. Whereas like, I think we should be starting with positives and then breaking it down a little bit. There is totally a chance that this is just not the specific, this is not specifically one of those things that we're emphatically in support of or against. Karen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Well, I think we are overwhelmingly emphatically in support of the direction that RAMP is going. And I think if that is the case, and I'm correct in my sort of observations of what I've heard people say about affordability and multifamily, expanding access to multifamily residents, I think we are overwhelmingly in support of the direction. Yeah, the devil's in the details, right? And the trade-offs and how much revenue we have. But for us to say, yes, we support this direction, and we have recommended, and in fact, we recommend expansion of and continued improvement of this program is pretty clear. And I think true and accurate to what board members have said. So I think we could say more emphatically that we support the direction and still get to the point Tom was making, and here are the ways that we've said we'd like to see the program expanded. I think that would be helpful direction to the bureaus.
Do any of the pub members specifically have a comment just to respond to this area before we definitely jumped around the letter itself, so
am I the only one experiencing that Robin is trying to speak, but we don't hear her?
Yeah, Robin froze. So while Robin's getting unfrozen, maybe needing to sign back in. Robin, can you hear us, and can we hear you? Okay, let's give Robin a minute to come back to us, and let me try and pick up here and see if there's other hands raised. I guess what would be helpful now, I mean, we still have.
Yeah, Karen, if I can just go back really quickly, because I'm not sure, we came back to the RAMP, but one thing that when there was mention of the brevity of the letter, it's always more helpful to be brief. But as I think Sarah and others have said, you also want to make sure that you're communicating, kind of the whatever is most important to the full pub to communicate. A reminder too that this is the first letter. The next letter will also provide opportunity to dive into more details of what you're going to research more fully. So you'll also have that opportunity. I think that's part of the reason why, at least in the prior years, there has been more of this section about talking about their priorities, because you have some new members on council. They haven't necessarily read your reports, your annual report before, where you're talking about what pub's priorities are. And so this is an opportunity both to communicate that formally to the full council, and of course do a little bit of the political strategy of trying to show where you line up with the mayor's guidance. Maintaining your independence, as Tom said, is very important. The mayor's guidance is still coming out. We're waiting on his third budget memo, which I think is on the verge of coming out. And so, you have to be careful about making general statements about, being in line with the mayor's guidance, because it's not done yet. And so this is still a letter that's early in the process, which is why it focused more on just the components of the mayor's guidance that connect to your work, as opposed to making general statements as a whole about supporting the mayor's guidance, because the mayor's mayor's guidance is somewhat ever changing throughout this process, and this is just a snapshot in time.
Excellent context, Amy. Thank you so much for that. And that is one thing I was thinking as I was listening to you all talking about that we do have new counselors who may be completely or commissioners, excuse me, completely unfamiliar with, well, not completely, but anyway, are not familiar with PUB. And, you know, having a restatement of some of our values may in fact be helpful for context for them as well. So thanks for saying that, Amy. Robin, you are back. Are you frozen again? You were back.
I'm back,
Okay.
but on my end it tells me that I have like 2 screens, and so I hope I'm not glitching.
Yeah, you seem to be here in duplicate, so which is
Okay.
great. Two Robins is better
Yeah.
than one. So
Something happened on my end for a second. I was like, oh, it must be everyone. I'm like, no, it's just me. Hopefully I didn't miss anything.
it just
Looks like
Amy was responding to the really that last section of the letter where I believe Alexis sort of put out to the group that maybe we should sort of trim that down. Tom had made the comment that it sort of implies that we're working for the mayor, and if we're briefer in that section, it might, you know, state our imply or signal our independence more effectively. And Amy just provided some context about why it might be important to in fact include details and restatements from our work plans and our value statements, because there's some, you know, new, well, for other reasons, but also because there are some new commissioners that may not be as familiar with PUB. So
okay.
yeah, so that's what you missed. And we have about 15-ish minutes, just doing a little time check here for folks to think about getting what you want on the table and getting us to a place where we can make a decision about forwarding this letter on to City Council and what it's going to take to do that. So carry on, everyone.
Okay. So there is one thing that I wanted to mention, and I think this is just about the word choice in general. It felt like a lot of what I was reading was in passive voice. And I wanted us to be more active, more like the word choice, like, I don't know how to explain it, but like we are asking for recommendations, we're asking for things. But when we say like we're requesting, it just feels such a soft thing. And I want somewhere between request and demand where it feels like, hey, we're here for a reason, we're asking for these things. And in just a lot of the PUB requests continued engagement, like it was stuff like that where it was like, how do we make some of these requests more like active, and that way it feels like it's less of a casual request and more of a like, this is what we expect of you. Tom, go ahead.
I totally agree with what you just said, Robin. I've been feeling the same way, and I also highlighted that on my copy about request. Anyway, something I wanted to bring up just really quick, and it relates to having the Bull Run treatment plant on the list for this letter. And I don't know, I mentioned this in an email to some people, but I thought I'd mention it to the entire board. I tuned in to a Zoom meeting with the Water Bureau project out there and in the project area. Anyway, at that meeting, they stated that the budget now, or the estimate for the Bull Run project, is up to $1.35 billion, up from what it was, at least in the conversation that they had on this Zoom meeting. Somebody said that's up from 820 million to, again, 1.35 billion. So that's a $500 million increase, which is equivalent to another STEP project. So I'm bringing that up because that's a heck of a lot of money. The director of Water Bureau didn't mention that at our last meeting when she was presenting overview of the budget. So that, I think, is really going to affect a lot of how we look at things, having such an enormous increase. And I'd like to ask staff if they can get confirmation of that. I mean, I know I heard what I heard, and I heard it from the Water Bureau, but it seems that it would be good to get it in some more written format or something like that from the Water Bureau, because it's a giant budget item that's going to really affect all the rates and everything anyway. So I just wanted to mention that to everybody. Thank
So
you.
Tom, are you suggesting including that request somewhere in this budget letter?
No, not necessarily in the letter. I think just
Okay,
highlighting that it is an issue that we're concerned about, and it's here, it's on the list, it's bulleted. And we can add, but I think for us to get more into it, we need one, confirmation that what I heard is correct. And do they have some information that they want to share with us? Because that's the kind of thing to me that the Water Bureau should, as soon as they found out, they should have sent a note to the chairs of the board and the staff and saying, hey, guess what, this is
right. But so hear you loud and clear, Tom. I just want to encourage us to stay. Let's bring, that's kind of more of an announcement or a request.
wanted the whole
Entirely
board to
valid and
know,
important,
and
but
then-
let's try and wrap up the budget letter, because that's got a hard deadline. So.
Oh, we forgot to put trees on this letter. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for your input, Tom. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm over here. I've got both screens and I'm like looking over the end parts of the budget letter as well.
So I was just adding, somebody had suggested possibly putting expects continued engagement instead of requests, as.
I kind of like that.
And the one other that I wanted to go back to, because there was some back and forth, and I think I followed the conversation. So I heard both some interest and a little bit of concern about being supportive of RAMP, but not overly emphatic supporting. I think Sarah's edits here did a little bit of kind of the recognition of the program. I think maybe to respond to, I think maybe Karen, you had suggested maybe more explicitly saying something like supports the, I can pull up what the, I think I had noted what the comment was, that you support the direction RAMP is going. So we could add something like that here. Something like that. Does that kind of achieve a blend of not going too far as support, but acknowledges the support for the current, but still has the language that focuses in on what the limitations are, and can I just get a sense of whether I see a thumbs up from Karen and from somebody else in the room, from Alexis? Not hearing any objections. Maybe to make sure that I'm following where we're at, I will start at the top. Shall we go through and see if I've captured kind of what I've heard so far, to see whether there's general agreement about the direction. So I had heard the interest in adding a brief sentence in this first paragraph, just clarifying the role, policy, operational, and budget work that ties this into a single paragraph. There were the edits we just discussed in the RAMP program, and where possible, and I can look for other places like this where the word like requests is, to make it a little bit more active. based on those suggestions. And I think there also was a suggestion to also put this kind of statement in some of the other sections as well. So I'd have to look and review and see where the appropriate parts for that are, unless somebody has some specifics that they want us to look at initially. I'm not sure that I know where we landed in the specifics about, Karen had some specific language that was suggested to add to this section related to climate resilience, watershed protection, and seismic preparedness. And then there was the suggestion for a broader paragraph. But since this is our only meeting for the board to review, I think there needs to be some discussion as to the specifics of what that would look like, or whether there's specific language that the full pub wants to sign off on or delegate that language to make sure that it's incorporated, since there will not be another meeting. If it goes beyond just the sentence that was recommended. There also was the suggestion about ensuring the condition of employees. And I noted the edit to that sentence. I'm assuming that this last portion, I haven't, I'll have to look at it and see whether that is removed or becomes another sentence. The way it's written right now kind of broke that sentence in half. So, and then there were just the addition of step. And then I think that I also heard Tom say trees that is not included in this letter. And so I'm not sure where specifically folks might want to call that out.
Tom, you got your hand raised?
I would put it as a bullet point underneath where we have the other bullets and just put BES tree planting program, because we do support that. So, I mean, we had a presentation on RAMP, we had a presentation on trees. We have a lot of stuff about RAMP, but we don't have anything about trees. So since they came to us and gave us all the information, it seems like we could do that. I do want to point out an inconsistency that we have under this infrastructure thing, and it goes back up to the discussion about the people that work at certain facilities that are substandard, and then the part above that where it says that we support that BES prioritizes based on the conditions of the system. And the reality of that is that, and then it says the condition of the system and begins to address racial disparities in public investment. BES currently, when they look at projects and the conditions of things, they do it based on conditions. So there's no attention to racial disparity or equity. It's like if a system's breaking down and it's the worst that they've got, that's how they address it. So for instance, and that's a different kind of issue than the one that's talking about the workplace environment. So just so that we all know, in terms of BES actually saying, okay, we've got a bad condition for infrastructure in this neighborhood, and we've got a bad one in this neighborhood, and which ones of these neighborhoods has the most environmental justice issues associated with it. And if one does have more environmental issues, but the other one has more technical issues, their process is to address the technical neighborhood first. So I don't know if everybody knows that, but that's the way I have, that's the way they used to work before when I worked there. And I believe that's the way they still work today. So we've got these two issues, one about environmental justice for the employees that work there, but then environmental justice for the neighborhoods where BES and Water Bureau both work? And do they address things in that particular way? Getting a confirmation of that, I think, would be important to get as well. But just, anyway, just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Tom. I see Bob has their hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to go back to 2 points. One is, you know, if you want me to take a track of that paragraph, I'm happy to do it on the green infrastructure, the built out paragraph. I think if we do that, that's where trees would go. That's part of that watershed approach. So that's where I would put the bullet about trees, but I would make it broader and make it about green infrastructure, watershed health, climate resilience, and regulatory compliance, environmental regulatory compliance.
Sounds good to me, Bob.
Yeah, I also personally like that idea, and I feel like it successfully attempts to actually kind of work the information, both of your information points in eloquently. I was the one that did the edit on these priorities must not outweigh the material realities of subpar work conditions. I do want to say that is infrastructure maintenance. It's not specifically pipes, and I'm not specifically talking about like a toxic work environment. I'm talking about pub employees telling me that after they went to our facilities in January, we did a field trip a little while back, and I've had pub members say that the work environment was pretty abhorrent. And so I think it's important to address that and notice that it's infrastructure and not necessarily like a social environment, but that it definitely leaves there definitely needs to be another sentence in between the one that I've added and like the board is committed, because it feels like it should flow a little bit more smooth. And technically my edit did kind of eliminate the sentence, the rest of the sentence that's currently in Jesus, what are they called? I can't remember what they're parentheses. There we go. Right. Yes. The part that is in the parentheses, I didn't necessarily have an edit for it, but I definitely think it needs one if we want to keep that or if we want to eliminate it. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I have an edit on my end anywhere. I see Lorraine's hand is up. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just to speak about that tour last year and where I would like to just interject a little bit on that and the importance of providing a proper working environment for staff is that if we cannot keep and retain staff to run that facility, then we don't have a facility. And that is the point I think that is most important. It's not that we are taking over the role of a union or anything like that. I think it's business. It's a business purpose to say that, one, but also it's a human element also, in that we need to take care of staff and ensure that if we are saying that they what was the term that came up during COVID? They are essential, then let's really behave as if they're essential. Saying it and showing it are two different things. And I would like to know that if these staff, if we should run into another situation like COVID and staff need to be like literally living on the plant to keep our systems running so that stuff don't back up in our homes and create an environmental issue, I think that is vitally important.
Thank you, Lorraine. I was trying to figure out something to say like that, and I think you said it better than I could. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. Exactly. And I think maybe a way we can accomplish exactly with the emphasis, the due emphasis that Lorraine suggested is just to separate providing safe working conditions for staff entirely from trade-offs, entirely from balancing. It is simply our expectation that the bureaus will provide healthy, safe working conditions for staff. That's really not negotiable. So I would suggest taking Robin's fantastic words and just stating that as an expectation, not as something that gets balanced or traded off because of the need to also invest in failing infrastructure. You got to do both, right? So that's my 2 cents. And again, time check. Let's give ourselves 5 minutes to kind of wrap up where we want to go with this. Any other major, well, not just major, but like concepts, additions, sort of big things that haven't been mentioned yet. Couple minutes to get your words out there. And then I think we need a few minutes to say, okay, what are we going to do with all this? Because we have a kind of a bit of a monster here that we're asking staff to wrestle. So. Oh, and I wanted to just acknowledge that Bob, your suggestion or offer to write up a paragraph. Let's consider that we might not get to see such a paragraph today, and consider how we might want to sort of trust some authors to put a paragraph together and paste it into the letter here.
So there's really 2 paragraphs too. One is the environment stuff that I mentioned. The other one that I mentioned was the swapping around of bureaus or parts of bureaus, and how it's important because it has huge budgetary implications, that the public be apprised of that early and often, not after the fact.
I see Alexis has their hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. If Amy, can you remind us of the timeline for this? So for example, if Bob was going to write some new paragraphs, and then we were going to work on another draft of a cleaned up version of this, do we have enough time for that to then be like sent out to everyone for I'm assuming that this is something we have to vote on.
We
Okay.
don't, because you don't have another public meeting. So unless you want to schedule another meeting
okay.
within the next like 5 days,
Gotcha.
that you need the Bureau's request. Now, remember, you also have the second budget letter. So, it depends on the level of detail that you want in a paragraph versus if somebody, has a few sentences and we can review it and have everybody agree to it today, then that is one option. Another option is, trusting, what is going to be drafted by an individual, but then delegating kind of the finalization. Sometimes we've, delegated to staff with 1 or 2 volunteers. Sometimes it's been a chair or other volunteers to finalize the letter to make sure that whatever was drafted by an individual member kind of lines up with what the full pub, agreed to and discussed in the meeting, because sometimes that can be challenging because there may be more depth to those recommendations that we didn't have the time to fully discuss in the meeting today. And so if it starts to go too deep, then it may be something that needs to be held for the second letter. And in this letter, it's more general. And so you could delegate to, 1 to 2 people working with me to finalize the letter, but the bureaus have to submit them by the 26th, which means we need to finalize it and get it to them, ideally before the 26th, so that they can, add it into their publish documents and make sure that they meet their deadline, which is next week.
This is Robin. I think we've had luck in previous meetings where we kind of come to a consensus, and then just have a couple people add a couple of sentences of what we said in the meeting. And I think it was like we essentially vote to agree to the letter that we have, with the explicit knowing that it will be like a paragraph will be added, a little bit of grammar, but that overall we're not changing anything. But trusting the staff and the other pub members to stay aligned with our values, and that way we can do like a weekend get together, just a couple of us, to finalize whatever letter words need to be said. I personally think that might be the best idea, because there's a couple of things in here that I don't think that we're going to get finished in the next 5 minutes. But I personally trust my board members, and I know that we've had to do this kind of situation with previous letters, and that it might be helpful for us. Karen, go ahead.
With that, I have a suggested motion. So let's see how this lands with people. I move that we support incorporation of the comments made today into the budget letter, and delegate to staff and 2 board members to finalize and submit the budget letter.
This is Tom Lipton. I second the motion.
Is it public comment after, or is it comment period after the motion before the vote?
There's a call for discussion and then public comment.
Okay, that's what I meant to say. So I guess we're in the call for discussion. I know I want to put myself on that as well. But anyone else want to discuss this before we vote? I'll jump back in. This is Robin. I believe I generally support this, but I also just wanted to say that I had interest in adding like a sentence to the lead hazard reduction program about, we have a lot of public commenters specifically coming in to ask us for the bureaus to be more proactive about sending out lead testing. And I think that being more proactive about sending out lead testing, which is currently like free to access, is just increasing access, and it's not necessarily choosing a side or pushing agendas. And so I think it's important. I think we could easily push that request from prior public comments into this lead hazard reduction program paragraph. Other than that, I'm in general support of the motion. Sarah, go ahead.
Hey, Robin. So I have my staff hat on. So as the staff member, I do the outreach for our free lead testing program for residents. And, you know, we had over like 24,000 requests for lead test kits last year. And we had, you know, over 10,000 samples that we analyzed. So, you know, it was our banner year, if you will. So I'm just curious of like what, and I think that this is sort of straying from the intent of this letter. But I'm just really curious of like what, you know, what else should we be doing to get information out about this lead testing program? And yeah, so I guess my caution is putting that in this letter without having more information about like the work that I do already to get the word out.
Okay, thank you for that. Karen, you have your hand raised. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I did. In the interest of discussion of the motion on the table, I would not support adding a comment, anything in addition to what we've said in the lead hazard reduction program, really for the reasons that Sarah stated, as well as we have other opportunities. And in our final budget letter, we can go into more specific details And we can do so when we have more up-to-date information.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Any other pub members for discussion before we open it up to public comment? Not seeing any yet. Is there any public commenters for this? Not seeing any. Okay. So I think that means we move to a formal vote then. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I hope I have the numbers right.
If you're calling for a vote, I think I'm number one and I vote in support. Yes. Karen Williams, co-chair and voting member.
This is Robin Castro, co-chair. I vote in support. Looks like Heather's number 3.
Yeah, this is Heather, voting member. I vote in support.
Lorraine Wilson, voting member. I vote in support.
Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote in support.
Chris Richard, voting member. I vote in support.
Teresa Huang, voting member. I vote support.
I can't see the numbers or which one I am, but this is Bob Solinger, and I vote in support.
Thank you, Bob.
This is Alexis Rife, voting member. I vote in support.
Sounds like the motion passes. Thank you.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
So I have a question now for Tom and Alexis. Are you willing to be those 2 board members that work with staff and whatever paragraphs Bob Salinger sends you to craft this into our final budget letter? Are you guys still on board for that?
So I unfortunately am out of town and traveling starting tomorrow through Monday. So I don't think I can commit to that.
Fair. No, that's fair. Thank you. So yeah, I'll turn it to Robin. So we need to find 2 folks. Yes, go ahead.
I can do it. Yes.
Wonderful. This is Robin. I just wanted to jump in and say I had interest in being one of those people if volunteers are needed.
All right. Any objections or concerns from board members on delegating to Tom and Robin the finalization of this letter with staff? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody. All right. If I may, okay, Robin, if I take back facilitation reins in our final
Absolutely.
two minutes here. So I'd like to return to the issue of the BES director and responding to Lorraine's request for clarification. Bob Salinger, could you say more, please, in response to Lorraine's ask for a little bit more clarification on what you're looking for there?
Just that the Bureau of Environmental Services has been the city's brain around environmental programs. That includes science, policy, and programs and regulatory compliance. Those programs are all embedded in BES, and they make up what was historically called the Watershed Program, which has been dismantled. And as we heard a couple of weeks ago, the underpinnings of that, policy underpinnings, have also been downgraded. We've also seen a loss of programs within BES, reduction in those. So it's and the job description that was put out by the agency also very much minimized those roles. They didn't really appear in that job description, which is a marked departure from prior job descriptions for the director position, which emphasize those kinds of things. And so I think it's just important that we have some questions in there, or a question regarding what kind of experience they have and commitment they have to those aspects of the BES mission. What's been referred to as, gray to green, basically. How do you start to integrate in green strategies in a more meaningful way that get at, community benefits, urban heat island, water quality, air quality, equity, and so on, as opposed to simply the sewer infrastructure. And this is a BES focused question, by the way.
So Lorraine, any thoughts or responses to that? Does that provide you the sort of elaboration or details?
It does provide me with it. The only other follow-up question I have is what is the pub's position on the watershed initiative that Bob mentioned? That's what I want to know, so that we are aligned when we go in there with pub. That's all.
Well, I'll throw in a thought, Lorraine, and that is, I think while we haven't explicitly, stated or made or taken a vote in favor of support of the watershed plan and the floodplain management plan and so forth, I think, we certainly have, climate resilience. We have, protection of clean, right to clean water, and many values clearly stated that we could look to show our support for that. I mean, that's my 2 cents. It's not explicitly stated, but I think the sort of the spirit of watershed restoration, watershed protection is certainly contained within our values and priorities. That's my opinion as a board member. If others want to chime in and give some more direction to Lorraine, please do.
This is Tom. I'm hoping we'll see some of that in Bob's paragraph that he or paragraph or two that he prepares. That should give us a little bit more from the way he's looking at things. And I agree with what you just said, Karen. And I guess I would add something to say that well, no, I think you got it. I guess I'm sorry. It's a tough one to say because, for instance, even now at BES, on many of their projects, they'll say this is going to help. If they're replacing pipes, they'll have a little note that says this is going to help the Willamette watershed and things like that. So the word watershed is used a lot. And so what are we trying to get at? And as you said, Karen, we have not actually had an opportunity for the board to really dig into this issue because we haven't had somebody bringing it up so much as Bob coming to the board now and helping to bring this out and bring it to light more. So yeah, it's a little bit tough, I think, for you and Bob both.
But again, what I'm also hearing is, Bob saying that, the questions are already written, that Bob and Lorraine will be there as pub representatives, but it doesn't sound like they're going to have the opportunity to necessarily ask their own questions or even pub's questions. So I guess I would say in meaning to be helpful to Bob and Lorraine. I mean, you are our eyes looking into the experience of whatever these candidates choose to tell you about, and if you don't hear anything about someone's experience with future thinking and what's the climate going to look like in 50 years and how are we making decisions now that affect that, if you're not hearing that, I think it's important to point that out. We didn't hear anything from these candidates about XYZ, so we're almost asking you to sort of if what the candidates respond, are they responding with sufficient experience and sort of commitment to these things that are important to us? That may be the best you can do if you're not able to ask specific questions and go deeper on any particular topics.
Thanks so much, because I was just looking at the Portland Watershed Management Plan, and the last annual report was in 2010. So that's a long time ago. And so I just want, I just wanted to understand it a little bit better, so I will know what I'm looking for within the framework that we are working with, right? As representative of Bob and other things that are already set. So I just wanted to understand it better. So thanks so much.
And thank you both for carrying this responsibility. Bob, did you want the last word on that?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just don't want to demoralize people too. Every process is different, so we may or may not get questions, and so we'll have to see. But I want people to go away thinking we definitely worked.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't totally clear on that myself, so sorry to misstate something as certainty that was likely but not certain. Okay, I think we do need to wrap up, and we do need to wrap up. It's not just that I think it. So just foreshadowing, our next meeting is February 7th. We're going to be hearing from Commissioner Mapps. We're looking at having Commissioner Mapps first on the agenda because of commitments that the commissioner has. So we'll put public comment and some of our business minutes and that sort of thing after we have a conversation with Commissioner Mapps. And see anything else? I don't think anything else we need to, just acknowledging, thank you all for sending some of your thoughts about topics that you want the commissioner to be prepared to engage with us on. Those have been conveyed, and Robin and myself and Amy and Eliza met with Commissioner Mapps staff, liaison to PUB, and conveyed those things that you all had said you wanted to hear about. So I hope we look forward to a productive discussion and folks really being able to get to know Commissioner Mapps if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting them.
And I just want to add, everyone will get the update because we get these read aheads in between. But it seems like the conversation with Commissioner Mapps is going to be over two main topics: the budget, as well as the upcoming transition to a new form of government. And so just be mindful of the questions that you can ask within those realms, questions that kind of link both of them together. And that way we can be as goal oriented and get the most out of this conversation with Commissioner Mapps, because it's going to be one of those pieces that helps us as we work through the budget, and it'll probably give us something extra to add to the follow-up budget letter. So yeah.
All right, thanks, Robin. I just the red font there that was on the last slide, just looking ahead for your own personal planning and coordinating with your work calendars, that our February meetings are adjacent weeks. February 7th and February 16th are one right after the other. So anything else, Robin? Are we ready to adjourn?
I think we're ready.
All right, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your engagement, and we will see you in a couple weeks.